Hi there, and welcome to the third in our series of transition video conferences, or really the second in our series if you don't count the one way back last April. We hope you caught the first one a couple weeks ago, in which we talked in some detail about the transition from Telstar 4 to GE in terms primarily of the transition of your satellite antenna and some log applications, and touched on Digicipher. Today our focus will definitely be on the transition to Dicipher II technology, and will be primarily designed for the engineers as we get into it. But I thought we would start the conference by recapping the major issues for you in terms of the satellite antenna move and in terms of broadcast operations log issues. Joining me in the studio today to pick up some of the pieces that I can't do, David Burrows from National Datacast, sitting immediately to my right, and Andy Butler, who's back at the Wurlitzer organ back there, the Dicipher II installation, where we'll be actually taking you through some of the mechanics of installing and operating the new DSR 4000 IRD. Let me just talk through the agenda briefly so you know what the sequence is here. Today's agenda includes discussion of the satellite move, the antenna moves, the satellite transition itself. That's most of the material that was discussed a couple weeks ago by Bill Hall at the Satellite Operations Center. Then I'll be talking about transponder allocation and log issues. That's some of what I discussed and some of what Nick Agresti from Broadcast Operations discussed in the first video conference. Andy Butler will be picking up both Dicipher I issues on GE3 and then the DSR 4000 installation and operations. David Burrows will be talking about the PBS National Datacast transition. Back to Andy again to talk about local insertion system and remote control issues for that matter. And finally, hopefully about an hour into the show, as we did last time, we'll be ready to take your questions and hope we've got some of the answers. So the big issue as we come to it just a few days from now is the move of your antenna to GE3. GE3, Dicipher I, ALS, and analog Dicipher I feeds and the ALS analog transmission begin on Sunday, October 5th at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. That's the first time that you will have access to our signal on GE3, and we'll talk at some length about that in just a minute. GE1, Dicipher II feeds will begin at exactly the same time. Those feeds are primarily intended for the stations in Alaska and the Caribbean who do not have access to GE3, but they will obviously be available to continental U.S. stations as well. And we'll talk at some length about those transponder, that transponder. KU-band service on Telstar 4 ends on Saturday, October 11th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, or midnight if you will. C-band service will remain there. Let me touch that one. Let me just hammer that one. KU-band service on Telstar 4 ends 1 week after it began. That's Saturday night at about midnight. You will have that entire week to repoint your antennas anytime between October 5th and 11th. But we're hoping you don't wait until that very last minute, because we'd like to have some assurance by the middle of the week that we've gotten 95% of you or 98% of you already moved, and that there's nobody who's going to be caught in the lurch at that very last moment telling us that you hadn't found GE3 or GE1 yet. Let's talk about the specifics of moving from Telstar 4 to GE3, and in particular the specifics of moving to the Dicipher I 5-channel MCPC. It will exactly duplicate the 5-channel digital service that you're currently getting on Telstar 4, composed of schedules 5A0, 5A5, 5B1, 5B5, and 5B6. It's an exact match, except that it's on a different satellite. It's on GE3, transponder 22, vertically polarized at 12140 megahertz. And it already shows in your DSR 1500 plan, if you haven't changed it since that very first time we told you what frequencies to load in that plan when we were on Telstar 4. For remote control users, it does require a new profile. We'll talk about that a little later in the video conference. At the same time you find that Dicipher I feed, you'll find an ALS analog transmission. It's an exact duplicate of the feed on Telstar 4. It's on GE3, transponder 20, vertical, 12100 megahertz center frequency. We ask and hope that you will use a standard receiver because of the characteristic, because National Datacast would like you to do that because of its better handling of the VBI. On your standard receiver, it's format H channel 81. You're going to need to change the bandwidth. If you're already using a standard receiver to receive ALS on Telstar 4, you'll be changing the bandwidth to 36 megahertz, and you'll be adjusting for video levels, remembering that we're on a full transponder at this point. A few technical tips. GE3, this is pretty obvious. GE3 is at 87 degrees west longitude. It's 2 degrees east of Telstar 4, slightly lower elevation. It is a very hot satellite, as Bill Hall told you last time, has hot side lobes. You will want to know, you will want to go for a main lobe OSD reading on your Digicipher IRD of 10.9. If you're not at 10.9, you're probably not on the main lobe. There is a beacon at 12198 megahertz. You can use that beacon to optimize both your pointing and polarization. But again, look for that 10.9 OSD reading to make sure that you're really on the center lobe of the satellite. If you're doing the slightly more complex move from Telstar 4 to GE1 using an Andrew antenna or any other antenna that you have at your disposal, it is a 7-channel Dicipher II MCPC that consists of 4 PBS and 3 station and regional network channels. Remember, this is an immediate transition. As you go from Telstar 4 to GE1, you'll also be going from Digicipher 1 to Dicipher II, and you only have that 1 week of both satellites to make sure that you've not only found the new satellite, but that you've also been able to operate Dicipher II. This feed will be on GE1 transponder 3, horizontal, 3760 megahertz. And when you're pointing for that satellite, you can use the analog feed, not ours, but an analog feed on transponder 19 horizontal, that's 4080 megahertz for peaking. Few tips for repointing the C-band antenna. Remember that GE1 is at 103 degrees. It has beacons, which you can also use for pointing purposes, at 3700.5 megahertz vertical and 4199.5 horizontal. Again, make sure you've got your antenna optimized both in terms of pointing and in polarization. And that's it for Telstar 4. It'll be gone a week after we first see GE3. Nothing lasts forever. Request your Andrew strut links if you haven't already done so from Bill Hall at the Satellite Operations Center or by putting a request in the Satellite Plus conference on PBS Express. And more important to us, frankly, is that you report your successful antenna repointing or any problems you've got that require assistance. You can do that certainly by phone calls, but if you've got something that you think is a significant issue that may affect more than just you, talk to us in Satellite Plus, and we will answer in Satellite Plus. It will be very important for us to know that you got your antenna moved, and if we have not heard from you by Wednesday or so, we have to call you. And as you know, I sometimes get frustrated having to call you for some of this information. So we really hope that you will use Satellite Plus to report the successful pointing so we know that we can safely end our transmissions on Telstar 4. So that's about it in terms of what Bill Hull presented to you last week. I want to move on to what I did and what Nick Agresti did and talk just a little bit about transponder allocation and log issues as you move to the new bird. Real quickly, for reference, you know where we are right now. We're on KU band transponder 7 on Telstar 4 with that half analog and a half transponder with the 5 channels of DC1 service. We also have the clear feed. We have station and regional backhauls, which you have not had to worry about on SBS 5. And we've been doing some DC2 and DTV testing over on GE's K2 satellite. And where we're going, this is the full 7 KU band transponder loading on GE3. Don't need to spend much time on it here. We'll build back up to it again very quickly. And on other satellites, where we're going is GE1 C-band transponder 3 with that 7-channel MCPC, and we'll be leaving the C-band clear feed right where it is on Telstar 4. Just a quick touch on the status of the satellite right now. You know, it was launched on September 4th. It went to 83 degrees for testing, was moved to 87 degrees less than a week ago. And today, the satellite was actually, or some transponders on the satellite were actually turned over to the first users. Today is the inaugural day for GE3. PBS, however, has to wait just a few more days, and we will acquire our transponders on October 5th after they've moved the SpaceNet 3 satellite, which is currently co-located with GE3, into a new orbital position. So now let's talk about the actual overlap period so you get a better understanding of exactly what's available to you and when. The Telstar 4 GE3 transition, that's your move from Telstar 4 to GE3, you've got from Sunday, October 5th through Saturday, October 11th. On Telstar 4, you'll be seeing Ku-band transponder 7, exactly as you do now. And on GE3, you'll be seeing a Digicipher 1 feed that exactly duplicates the Digicipher 1 feed on Telstar 4, and you'll be seeing ALS on a full 36 meg transponder. And in terms of your network logs, the schedule nomenclature stays exactly as it is now. We'll be calling everything exactly what we do now. You've only got one set of logs to deal with, but you'll know you can get to those feeds on either satellite. The longer term transition is the Dicipher 1 to Dicipher II transition, and you've got from Sunday, October 5th to Saturday, November 1st to accomplish it. We've just told you what we'd have on transponders 20 and 22. That's the ALS analog and the Dicipher 1 feed. But now we're showing you on this slide Ku-band transponder number 3, where we'll have 3 channels of station and regional network SCPC, that's Dicipher II SCPC feeds, no longer backhauling on SBS 5, but now available to you directly. And on Ku-band transponder 24, a 6-channel MCPC. Let me touch on this one briefly. The 6-channel MCPC will be loaded with 4 channels that you know the nomenclature of, 5A0, 5A5, 5B1, and 8. There will be 2 additional channels, which on this slide are known as supplementary service. Those are new channels. They will not immediately have anything on them. They will within about a week. Here's the key point on this one. We had told you in the previous video conference that we would not be bringing this feed up until October 15th. But for various technical reasons, as well as to give you more time to ensure that your Dicipher II DSR 4000 IRDs are working, we're going to bring the feed up right on day 1. You'll actually be able to go over and find it. We do ask one thing. Know that we are in tests during that first week. We would suggest, as we are reconfiguring encoders and making sure everything's working, that you not immediately rely on that Dicipher II MCPC for your primary services. It'll probably work. You know which schedules are going to be duplicated, but we would suggest that you hang on to Dicipher 1 for that first week. Just make sure that you got your antenna moved over, and we'll worry about Dicipher a little later. And for logging purposes, let us show you the schedule nomenclature. Again, the Dicipher II feeds have channel numbers 500 through 505 on the MCPC and 541, 2, and 3. You can kind of disregard channel 540, which is a growth channel. But remember, as we talk about log applications, and I'll get to that slide shortly, that 5A0 equals 501, and we'll not be giving you logs for both sets of schedules. They're just exactly the same. Also, now talking about the Telstar 4 to GE1 transition, remember on Telstar 4 you're looking at that 5-channel Dicipher 1 MCPC and ALS analog. On GE1 you go straight to a 7-channel Dicipher II MCPC with 4 PBS schedules and 3 station and regional network turnarounds. Those regional network turnarounds are exactly analogous to the 3 channels on the 3 SCPC channels on GE3. They do not equate to 5B5 and 5B6. So you're going to have to get used to looking at the regional networks as received here at PBS before they get turned around. You'll see everything that originated from a station or regional network uplink on one of those 3 channels. And again, in terms of log nomenclature, these are the channel numbers that you'll be used to. We will not be issuing logs for schedules 530 through 536, but because 531, for example, exactly equals 5A0, you'll know you can use the logs for your Dicipher 1 feed. And again, we'll show you that table of equivalencies in a minute. Meanwhile, back on Telstar 4, right where we left it, and staying there indefinitely, the PBS National Satellite Service, Schedule X, stays right on C-band transponder 18. And although we moved the regional and station backhauls from SBS 5 to GE3, National Datacast stays right where it is right now as a VSAT service on SBS 5 until sometime in mid-November, and Dave Burrows will be talking about that in more detail in a minute. And finally, on November 2nd, if everything plays out the way we hope it will with Digicipher II, we'll be saying farewell to Digicipher I. And on that day, we will begin providing digital television test transmission on Ku-band transponder 7. And also note that we'll be adding transponder number 9, that's the yellow transponder up there in the number 2 position. That's where the business channel feeds will begin on Monday, November 3rd. In mid-November, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but just to give you a sense of where we're going, in mid-November we have to change transponder numbers on 3 of our 7 transponders. The odd-numbered transponders, those that had been numbers 9, 7, and 3, will change to 19, 21, and 23. Now, we don't know the date for certain. This is all tied to the customers who were on SpaceNet 3 and are taking up temporary residence on GE3. They will have moved back to SpaceNet 3 in its new orbital slot, and we will pick up our final transponders, which are 19, 21, and 23. For the business channel, that means what had been on Schedule 509 moves to Schedule 519, and down on the transponder 23, those station and regional feeds that had been virtual channels number 541, 42, and 43 will become 511, 12, and 13. Again, we're going to know about this in a week. The schedules don't really change. It's only that the virtual channel number changes for those feeds. And finally, completing the jigsaw puzzle in January, we will load up the rest of the transponders with leased digital and analog services. So this again is that same slide I started with of 7 fully loaded Ku-band transponders. And I know I whipped through that in one big hurry. It was all covered in the first video conference. We did want to give you at least a grounding in it as we head into additional discussions. But if you've got questions on transponder allocation, transition schedule issues, please call me at the number on the screen, 739-5452. Or again, if you think it's something that's of general interest and you want to post it in Satellite Plus, feel free. That's what the conference is there for, and we would look for a discussion to continue there. Let me just do a couple slides that pick up the issues that Nick Agresti talked about last week. New channel, or 2 weeks ago now. New channels are going to mean new logs. In October, you've already seen your operations logs issued for schedules 5A0, 5A5, 5B1, 5B5, and 5B6, and the analog schedule 8. Those are the ones that you're used to, and for the month of October, whether you're receiving Digicipher I or Digicipher II, and whichever satellite you're looking at, we will simply continue to update those schedules. But in addition to that, we have, within the last day, I believe, issued the regional schedules 541, 542, and 543. Remember that you can still pick up those feeds on 5B5 or 5B6 where we're turning them around, except for the non-CONUS stations who are looking at GE1, and they actually have to pay much closer attention to those 3 regional channels, which on their satellite have a different number, but they are exactly the same schedules of station and regional feeds. And by October 12th, we'll be adding schedules 504 and 505. Those are the 2 additional supplementary service schedules on the GE3 Digicipher II 6-channel MCPC. And for November, the advanced schedules have already been issued, as you're aware, and schedules 5A0, 5A5, etc. have all been replaced by the new schedules 500 through 503. In other words, we're dealing in November on your logs strictly with Digicipher II virtual channel nomenclature. Were we to have to extend Digicipher I for any reason, we would know that well in advance and be issuing additional logs, but we'd be asking you to use the table of equivalents, which we're going to show you now, kind of in a reverse fashion. Remember that looking at the top line here, for example, Schedule 5B1, or the digital Schedule X, if you will, that's the way we issue the logs now. You know that on GE3 we call that channel 500, and on GE1 we call it 530, but we're only issuing logs for Schedule X or 5B1. GE3, it is channel number 500 on the virtual channel. Were we to have to extend the Digicipher I feed into November for any reason, you'd be looking at logs for 500, but knowing you were going to see it on your IRD, the same place you've always received 5B1. That's about it for traffic and operations issues. I've simplified it down to those 2 slides. If you've got questions on traffic and operations, the place to call is PBS Broadcast Operations, 739-5451, or address your questions to Traffic Chat. Well, that's about it. Boy, I could use a drink of water right now. I've been yapping nonstop for about 15 minutes. So rather than doing that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Andy Butler, who will be talking to you about some of the issues of Digicipher I on GE3 and moving into the DSR 4000 installation. Andy?
Thanks, Ralph. Well, if you think Ralph was moving fast, fasten your seatbelts because we have a lot of material to cover in the next few minutes. I want to make sure that we leave time to get to your questions and also a surprise visit that's coming up from some friends of ours up in Boston. As Ralph mentioned, the Digicipher I feed will continue on GE3 for a transition period. Now, this period will hopefully end November 1st, but there is a caution factor here. We will not terminate that feed until Dicipher II is fully operational and everyone is comfortable with using that as their main feed. If this happens a week or so early, so much the better. If we need to extend it beyond November 1st, we'll also do that. Also, as Ralph also said, the service will be on transponder 22 vertical. That's 12140 megahertz. This so happens to already be in your DSR 1500 transponder plan as transponder 29. That's if you have it loaded as it was originally suggested, and we hope you do. If you do that, or if you load it in an appropriate way, and we'll talk about how to do that under the various operating scenarios in just a minute, the IRD will act exactly the same as it did on Telstar 4. Now, there are 3 different modes to operate a Digicipher I. For manual operation, what do you need to do? Well, you need to make certain that transponder 29's profile is in your plan. Now, that's something that you've got to take care of and make sure that it's there. We are going to be posting some directions on how to do that as part of our postings in Compression Plus. Another mode of operation is, and oh, by the way, when you do use the transponder 29 profile, you'll notice that the frequency is 12142 megahertz. Now that's close enough. I mean, a couple of megahertz between friends won't make a bit of difference to your 1500, and it's a much easier way of allowing you to make the transition. Now, what if you use the remote control for the PBS remote control software? You need to do some work before you can use it. You need to add the GE3 profiles into your remote control so that they mirror the Telstar 4 feeds. That would be 5 digital feeds. These 5, 5AO, GE3, etc., will exactly mirror those feeds that are on Telstar 4. You also need to add 1 analog feed, which of course is 8 GE3. We are posting detailed instructions on how to make these changes in Compression Plus. Now, what about the LIS users? You also need to make a change. You need to modify the channel table in your LIS schedule editor to add GE3's channels. I will be posting a modified table in LIS Plus. All that you need to do is substitute that table for the one that is currently in your LIS setup. Now, you get everything set up. Everything's running, you get your DSR 4000s installed, you're satisfied with Digicipher II. Are you finished? Well, not quite. As much as we'd like to take those DSR 1500s and put them on the end of our anchor rope and use them to keep our bass boat in place, Next Level wants them back. They have a market for them in other countries. So the Digicipher II feeds are scheduled to end on November 1st. As soon as they end, November 1st or whenever they take out of service, you will have 2 weeks to return your 1500s to Next Level systems. Now, as we suggested in our last teleconference, hopefully you've saved at least 4 of your DSR 4000 boxes. They're exact fits for the 1500s. Please ship your 1500s. Now, you can't send them by Joe's Express. We do want you to use a real shipping company and ship them prepaid, not collect, prepaid, either FedEx Second Day Air, UPS Air, or an equivalent, and please insure them for $1,500. We may think they're worthless, but they are worth money. Now, when you're ready to ship them to Next Level Systems, 10120 Pacific Heights Boulevard, San Diego, California, 92121. Each of the cartons needs to have the return material authorization number Z as in zebra, 286299 clearly displayed. Now we're going to be posting all this information for you, so if your pencil broke, don't worry, you will have the information. Also, make sure when you do the return that you report your return to Ralph by either fax or email. You need to include the serial numbers of the units that you are returning. We need to verify this against the information that Ralph had previously. And please do take this seriously, because they're worth at least $1,300 a piece to the system. So we do need to get those back. Now, what about your 4000s? How do you get those suckers installed and running? Well, let's take a look at that. First of all, what about installation? Something you need to do before you do anything else. Make sure that your unit address has been sent in. We need to have both the serial numbers and the unit addresses from the IRDs. These are currently being entered into the entitlement management system here at PBS. Your DSR 4000 will not operate until it has received an authorization message from PBS, and it can't receive that message until we get it into the database. So make sure that you've sent them in. The instructions were posted in Compression Plus. We need the serial number and unit authorization numbers from the label on the box. Once again, on the back of the IRD, don't ask me why, but there are 2 serial numbers. Just to make sure you get authorized properly, please send us a serial number that's on the box. Now, how about installing your 4000s? I'm going to give you a couple of mounting tips. First of all, make sure when you install your 4000s, and our lab guys cheated on the ones they put in here for our example rack, make sure that you leave at least a full rack space between each IRD. Now this is for cooling, and people say, well, I feel the unit and it's cool. Why do I need to leave the space? This is not about the overall temperature of the unit. This is about allowing enough airspace for the convection to move the air in and out of the unit to cool certain key components in the unit. If you don't allow it breathing space, you're going to have problems with the IRD and premature failures. The second thing, and this is kind of freaky, it's only occurred in a couple of places, you need to avoid temperature differentials. This is severe differentials between the top and the bottom of the unit. Now this occurs in some installations that have the older style cooling systems where they force cold air in the top of the rack and then exhaust it out the bottom. And this has occurred in a couple of installations where the IRD was at the top of the rack. It had cold air blasting down on it. It got very cold on the top. It was very warm on the bottom from the air coming up. And the difference in tolerance on the components was enough that it just wouldn't operate properly. It's a simple fix. If you have that situation, put a piece of cardboard, cloth, styrofoam, anything you can find on top of the unit, just so it doesn't get that deep freeze from the air coming in from the top. Now, in addition to the physical mounting, the RF cables, we have a couple of tips. We suggest that you connect the vertical polarity to 0. Now, this is not an absolute requirement, but it makes it easier for us to troubleshoot it on the phone with you and get things right. Another warning, the splitter in the 4000 is active. It's just like the splitter in the 1500. So if you unplug a unit, any units that are downstream from it on the splitter will go dead. So be aware of that. Use it in your planning and don't let it trap you. The other caution is be careful to avoid foreign DC on the RF cables. Once again, these are smart IRDs. If they see even a very small foreign DC voltage on that center conductor, they'll shut themselves down, and there's no warning on the IRD to tell you why it's dead. So you can trap yourself very easy. A DC blocker is cheap insurance. A couple of other installation tips. Grounding is very important with these units. They are designed so that the RF, case ground, signal ground, and power ground are all separate and they all float. Now this is good engineering practice so you don't get ground loops. However, if your rack is not absolutely firmly grounded, you may have to supply a ground directly to the IRD case. This is something that you need to be aware of. You may also find that you require a ground block in the RF cables. Once again, if you don't have a good firm ground out at your dish, or if you have a complicated RF distribution system coming in, you may have to supply a ground right at the rear of the units. Both of these will show up as hits and interference susceptibility in the unit. Now, the remote control is easy. It's exactly the same as the DSR 1500. In fact, you can hang all three types of IRDs simultaneously on the same remote control cable, and they'll operate simultaneously. Now, the next item, the RF shield installation. This is something that we talked about in the previous teleconference. There is a technical bulletin about this posted on First Class in Engineering Plus. The situation is something that's cropped up in a couple of installations. What happens is if you operate broadcast auxiliary equipment in the 450 megahertz to 500 megahertz range, and that does include a very widely used broadcast auxiliary set of frequencies, you may have a problem with destructive interference to your IRDs. The IF frequency in the IRD is 479 megahertz optimally. So if you put a fairly strong RF signal between 450 and 500 in the vicinity of the IRDs, it will interfere with the IF and the unit will shut down. Now, if you've been following some of the engineering chats, Next Level, because most of their customers to date have been cable systems, have not seen very many instances of this type of interference occurring. We know that there are more of these type of units around broadcast stations than there are cable stations. So if you have this type of equipment in service, I would encourage you to test very quickly to see if it does create a problem for you. If it does, follow the instructions and obtain the kits. Now, I'll tell you, the installation of the kits is not trivial. You do have to completely disassemble your IRD case. Take the top off, that's 14 screws, take the front panel off, take the inner front panel off. So it's going to take some time, and it's not a trivial effort. So I would discourage you, if you don't have this type of RF present in your plant, I wouldn't do this just because I want to do it. It's something that does take some effort, but if you do have this kind of signal present, it's something that you definitely want to be aware of. So now you have your DSR 4000s all installed. If you hook up your RF and simply power the unit up, it will start searching for our Digicipher II signal. Now, you could just let it search, and eventually it will find our signal and it will download a channel map. Now, the problem is this can take several hours. So there's a lot of different combinations of frequencies and symbol rates and everything it has to try. I'm going to show you a method that will shorten that process and allow it to acquire a channel map and go into service in just a matter of minutes. Now, to do that, I have to warn you, I'm working without a net. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and this is where John Osborne and Rudy kind of get nervous because, oh my goodness, the boss is going to get himself in trouble. What I'm going to do is force a reset on this 4000. Now what this does is put the IRD in exactly the same condition as it will be when you take it out of the box and plug it in for the first time. So now I'm going to ignore the warning and tell it, yes, I want to reset. Notice the backlighted display. You won't be having to carry a flashlight to the racks anymore to tell what's going on. And I'm going to tell it, yes, I do want that reset. It warns me you're killing me. And of course I am just to do that. And now it should come back up, and it comes up to the main menu. There are 5 selections on the main menu. The one that it lights up first is called Language. This will only come up the first time that the IRD is powered up. You'll never see it again. Other sections of the main menu include Installation, Channel Selection, Diagnostic Status Display, Channel Selection. What you want to do is arrow up to Installation, hit Enter. Now you want to arrow down in the installation to Modulation. Move over to Mode, hit Enter, and then arrow to Manual. This gives you the ability to manually tune the IRD, and hit Enter. Move over next to Symbol. Hit Enter. This now allows you to select the symbol rate that you'll be operating at. This is the first piece of information that the unit needs to know what to go looking for. I happen to know you hit arrow up 4 times, and what it's doing is it's moving through a selection of, or a combination of valid symbol rates and forward error correction codes. We happen to use 29.3 symbol rate at 3/4 forward error correction. When you get to that choice, hit enter, and now the unit knows what type of modulation it needs to go look for. Now, you need to arrow back and arrow to, actually it's arrow up, to manual tune. Arrow over to port. I'm violating the rules. I'm using port 1 instead of port 0. Tell it port 0. Arrow over to type of modulation. Once again, our map is going to be on our KU feed, which is KU custom. Hit enter. It warns you it's going to interrupt service, and it enters it. The next piece of information it needs is what frequency do I need to look for. Arrow over to L-band frequency. Hit enter, and the frequency that you want to enter for our service on GE3 will be 1430 megahertz. Now, if you're able to see this, you'll notice that that is not what I'm entering here today. That is simply because we're using a test spigot off of one of our down converters back in the tech center. So I'm going to enter that frequency. Now, at this point, you start to see things happen. The unit is going out and starting to try to acquire a channel map, and while it's doing that, I can tell you that you can look at some of the LEDs and see that it's actually started. You have a Digicipher LED. It knows it's on port 1, so it knows what it's looking for. It's out there looking. Now, when it acquires the channel map, you need to tell it which channel map to use. So what you want to do is go back to your main menu, channel selection, arrow over to VCTs available, and hit enter. Now that gives you the nomenclature ID number. Hit enter, arrow down, and you'll notice that I had 000 with the star beside it. That means I have no virtual channel tables. The virtual channel table is the guidebook for an IRD that tells it what group of information it needs to refer to tune the selection of channels that we have available for it. When I arrow up and down, it will display the channel VCT tables that are valid. Right now, that will be channel 15 for the PBS services on GE3. So arrow down to 15 and hit enter. Now the IRD knows which group of information to go to in its memory to actually start tuning channels. And that's what we're going to do. As we go there, we're going to do a quick check of our display. We now know, since we're on a valid VCT, that we're going to look at port 1. We know that the Digicipher is authorized, so we get a Digicipher light. We also now get an alarm light because it's looking for video. It's smart enough to know that, okay, I should be finding video. It's giving us an alarm because we haven't told it what channel to look for the video on yet. And we also get an alarm on relay 1 because, once again, that's the slave set up at this point for our alarm channel. Now, let's go down and actually tune our channel. Go back to channel select, arrow over to channel, hit enter, and right now it's trying to look at channel 100, and you can't see the display, but there's no parens around 100. That means that that's not a valid number. I don't have it in my channel map. What I'm going to do is go to a number that is valid, channel 1, and now I've told it that I wanted to go to channel 1, and we have our picture. That's selecting your desired channel. Now, congratulations, your IRD works. Now it's time to make just a few final adjustments to the IRD. The first thing that you need to do is set up the main audio channels. You can check your display before you do that. What you should see is a green valid port number that in this case is port 1. You should see that you have a green LED by the Digicipher button that indicates that it is seeing a Digicipher signal, and then the most important one is the word authorized. You have the LED by authorized, which means we see it, we're talking to it, and it knows it, so it's ready to rock and roll. Okay? Now, there are a couple of things that you need to set up, and these are just something that you need to set the very first time that you fire up the IRD. And these are options that differ between the way we operate at PBS and the default operation that Next Level has defined for this unit, because it was designed for cable service primarily. So you go back and you select your installation menu off your main menu, hit enter, and go down to Audio 1. And this takes quite a few punches. You get down to Audio 1 and then arrow over once to Dial Normal. Now people say, well, what in the world does Dial Normal mean? It means dialogue normalization. What they do is put in an algorithm that actually tries to make the dialogue the same level as the background noise. Well, you have to hear it to know how horrible that is. So you want to defeat that for PBS programming. So you go in and select Dialogue Normalization Off and hit Enter. Your next choice is Audio Mix. Now this is for your main channel audio. It defaults to surround sound stereo. Once again, PBS does not transmit surround sound, and it creates some image confusion if it's trying to look for surround sound information and it isn't there. So what you want to do is go in and select True Stereo and hit Enter. One final thing that you need to set is on the far right hand side is compression. They label it moderate. Well, for us audio guys, if you heard this compression, it's not moderate. It's squash and destroy. So you want to take that compression and also turn it off. If your audio ever sounds funny, one of these two things has probably changed. Someone misset them or reset them, and you'll know it. We need to complete our audio settings, so the next thing you want to do is go down to Audio 2. You repeat a couple of the processes once again. Dialogue normalization, you want to shut off. You also want to take your compression and move it to off. The one that is different is Audio Mix. For our secondary audio services, which are Audio 2, we actually ship separate information. So rather than have stereo, we want dual mono. You enter that. It gives you two warnings, which basically reminds you that the derived mono on the back of the unit will be garbled. You see that when you hit E the first time. You hit E the second time, it gives you another warning that you're going to have to set the language, which defines what's going to come out of those independent audio ports, and we'll do that in just a minute. You hit it the third time, and it actually takes the command. And you need to note those warnings as you go through. Now, we've already jumped ahead. I set the compression, so that's been taken care of. The next thing that we need to do is set language, which you go back, go from installation to channel selection, go down, and you have your language 1, which should default to English 00, which it does, English 00, on both left and right. Language 2, this is what you have to set. You go into language 2, hit left, and you can go through a whole series of different choices here. The one that you want to set is Spanish. Now that is kind of a silly selection, perhaps you think, but it is just a way of differentiating our particular audio services, and I'm not going to keep you waiting while I go through and try to set all of this up. But basically, these are designators that we can change, and over the next few weeks, that's one of the things we're going to be experimenting with, is exactly which of these we do end up using. So when we get those final designations, we will be posting those in Compression Plus. So now that takes care of setting your languages. There's one more thing you need to do, and this doesn't apply to everybody, but if you're using this unit with either PBS remote control or the PBS LIS control package, you need to set the unit address so it knows how to talk to it from either of those two programs. So once again, for that, you need to go back to your installation menu, hit enter, and then arrow down a whole bunch of them. Is the best way I can think of it. It's about 14 or 15 down to the one labeled multi-drop. It defaults to station number 64, which is the first valid address for a Digicipher II IRD. arrow over, go to station, and then you can arrow up and change it to anything, any number between 64 and 254. Actually, it's whatever number you want to assign it on your multi-drop setup in either LIS or the remote control program. Hit enter, and now it knows which one it's supposed to be. Now that's how you do your installation and your setup. What about actually operating the IRDs? Well, I'm not going to go into a whole large explanation on this. The actual operation in terms of tuning it is very simple. You just channel up and channel down like any TV set. But I do want to show you a couple of things that may come in handy as we try to bring these units online, and that is the on-screen display. Now these are different than excuse me while I get to diagnostics. These are different than the on-screen display in Digicipher 1 because there are 3 different screens. They display a lot of information. I'm not going to try to take you through all of that because we'd be here all night, but I do want to show you where to find a couple of key items, in fact 5 of them, that we may actually ask you to tell us as we talk you through the installation. So once again, we're going to call up the diagnostic screens, the on-screen display, and then the first screen is screen A. And on this screen there's once again, like I said, a whole bunch of different information. There are only 2 pieces that are critical that we may ask you for. The first one is the unit address, and that is on the second line here. This is this big number that you've already sent to Ralph. Why would we want you to give that to us? Well, everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes we may make a mistake keying information in. You may have made a mistake sending it to us. Who knows? But if your unit is not being authorized, we may ask you to tell us, well, what is the unit number from the screen, not from the card. That way we know for sure what it thinks it is. The other piece of information that's important on this first screen is unit addressed messages. That's on the second line, and that is a counter that should increment several times a minute. What this counts is the number of times that our authorization program has actually sent a message to your unit. If this isn't incrementing, it isn't authorized. So that is something else we may ask you to take a look at for us. The other screen that's of interest is actually diagnostic screen C. Screen B has tons of things that will be of interest to next level systems, perhaps if you're on the phone with them, but the screen C has the other information that we may ask you to read us in the first couple of weeks. The important items there, the first one is in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and it's simply a single number. And this is a counter. It starts at 0, and it's the acquisition state. And what it does is, as it goes through each stage of acquiring the Dicipher II signal, it counts up. And if we're having trouble getting you authorized, we may ask you to tell us which of the what that number is so that we know where it got hung up and we can start trying to figure it out. The other one that's of importance is on line 3, 1, 2, 3. This is a series of numbers that actually are the worst signal that the unit has received, the best signal, and then 2 numbers that actually go into an equation that give us an idea of how stable the signal is. Once again, if you're having trouble with your signal, we may ask you to give us that information. And then that all-important one, the one that everyone's interested in, is the EB over N0, the EBNO number, and that is in the next line. Right now, I'm showing a 7.8 to a 7.9 here. Once again, as I said, this is a highly attenuated signal that we're tapping off of a test point. So what you want to see there is a 10.9. And you can see the results of multiple concatenated compression happening as you look at me on the screen. Anyhow, those are what you'll see on the diagnostic screens. Now, also in terms of operating your DSR 4000, folks have been asking us about, well, what about the auxiliary services? Well, we will still be offering the same auxiliary services on Digicipher II that we offer on Digicipher 1. These include the SAP channel, the LIS schedule data, time code, and also DTMF tones for Schedule X switching. Now, these are still being configured, and our final configuration, we think we have it where we want it, but we're still doing some testing. We'll be posting detailed instructions for accessing these auxiliary services in Compression Plus, and we intend to post that tomorrow. Now, one of the auxiliary services that will eventually be present on Digicipher II is the PBS National Datacast data, but it's a lot more to the datacast transition than that. They have a full plan on how they're going to do their transition, and here to brief you on that is Dave Burrows, the NDI Director of Operations. David?
Thank you, Andy. As the participating stations know, since the Telstar 401 failure, we've established a VSAT service on SBS 5 as our primary means of data delivery, but we still maintain a backup on the analog video VBI feed on ALS. The use of both of these feeds has tremendously helped to increase our reliability of service and will help us to get through this transition by allowing us a way to maintain that service. Now, during this transition, our goal is to maintain continuity of service to the datacast customers. We're presently providing service to Starsight, and we're gearing up for the nationwide launch of the Wave 4 Wavetop service. A successful transition for national datacast is therefore important during this critical time for Wave 4. Now, our transition will be performed in 3 phases. We've got to transition both the VBI and the VSAT to GE3. The VSAT's now in SBS 5, and the VBI, of course, is on Telstar 402R. We'll do that in 3 phases, which includes changing from our primary VSAT feed to a primary satellite feed, and then back to VSAT. And I'll discuss these phases in more detail shortly. Now, right now, we're working with most of the stations to change out EEPROMs on the data bridge line cards. These EEPROMs contain a driver that allows Wave 4 to interface with the VSAT data streams. Therefore, it's very important to get this work accomplished prior to the satellite transition, so we'll be able to switch back and forth between the VSAT and the satellite feeds. Anthony Johnson of the National Datacast staff is working with the stations on this project, and we appreciate your assistance in getting this completed as soon as possible. Now, since Telstar 401 died a while back, we've not had any service to Alaska. We're happy that we'll be able to regain that with the GE1 C-band transponder. We'll be putting data on the Dicipher II channel during this transition as well, and we'll be contacting those stations that's directly affected. Oh, incidentally, we do have plans to replace the ALS analog satellite video with a Dicipher II data stream to the continental U.S. and Hawaii sometime in the first quarter of '98, before the analog satellite video feed is actually discontinued. We'll be discussing those plans with the stations as this schedule gets closer. Now, as I said, we have 3 phases to this transition. In the first phase, phase 1, we'll be establishing satellite VBI as our primary means of network data delivery to the stations. And as I mentioned earlier, that's predicated on the data bridge EEPROM changeout that we're presently working with the stations. We'd like to get that completed by the start of phase 1 to ensure that everything is functional to avoid any problems in later phases. If you have received an EEPROM upgrade kit, please let us know when they're installed so we can check out the data bridge and get it ready for the transition. Call us if you have any problems in installing the EEPROMs before you move to GE3. Now, in phase 1, the stations will retune the Omni Standard satellite receiver to GE3 ALS analog video channel using the parameters as mentioned earlier. Receiver channel 81, horizontal polarization, changing the IF bandwidth to 36 megahertz. And since we have now gone from a half transponder back up to a full transponder, that output video level will need to be readjusted to 1 volt peak to peak. We need to get that done as soon as possible after you do your dish move to minimize the satellite downtime of our data. Once you've got it done, please call or email us to let us know it's accomplished. That would be very helpful to us. After the satellite receivers are retuned, we will verify the performance of the satellite feed by dialing into the data bridge, doing some checking of the data quality, and then reconfiguring the data bridge for the satellite feed as the primary means of delivery. Once that's verified, we'll coordinate with the stations to do the transition to the Starsight station node. And those steps include disconnecting that VSAT cable and that 9-pin adapter from the Starsight station node. And it might be a good idea to tape that adapter to the station node to avoid it getting lost, because it is going to be needed later. Then reconnect that old cable. That was the full rate data cable that should still be hanging from the back of the station node, connect it back to the COM1 port. As we do the first few sets of stations, if the satellite feeds are generally looking good, and in order to save time, we may send a blanket message via PBS Express to the stations to go ahead and move the cables, and then let us know when it's been completed. Keep watching the PBS Express conferences, especially Data Services Plus, for more details as we get into that phase. Then after the completion of Phase 1, we move to Phase 2, where then we'll be repointing all the VSAT dishes at the stations. As mentioned earlier, GE3 transponder 23 will be available for the National Datacast VSAT around the mid-November timeframe. First step is to repoint the uplink at the SoC to GE3, and then after that's accomplished, we'll then begin repointing the antennas at the stations. We've contracted Hughes Network Systems to perform that over a 3-week period. A Hughes representative will contact the station point of contact the day before they want to come and repoint the dish. On their day of arrival, they'll get there sometime between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. local time, Monday through Friday. They just need to get access to the dish to repoint it. They will then coordinate with the SoC to recommission the site on the new bird. After the completion of Phase 2, Phase 3 basically then rehomes our data back to the VSAT as the primary network feed and retains the VBI satellite as our active backup. That'll be performed immediately after the station VSAT report has been completed. We'll dial into the data bridge, verify the performance once again, and then reconfigure the data bridge to the VSAT input, then utilizing the analog satellite feed as an active backup. In the meantime, the stations should go ahead and change the station node to the VSAT feed as well. That involves disconnecting that full rate data cable from the Starsight station node again, and then reconnecting that VSAT cable with a 9-pin adapter back to the COM1 port. Once that's completed, if you would please phone or email us of that, that would also be helpful. Now please note that the standard receivers will still be needed by National Datacast for the backup satellite feed until such time we convert to the Dicipher II channel, which I mentioned or we're projecting for the first quarter of '98. They should remain in the racks dedicated to the analog ALS feed, just as they have been in the past. Now the next slide summarizes our time frames for the sequence of events for the National Datacast satellite transition. The first task is the EEPROM changeout going on now. Phase 1, the satellite receiver tuning. It's critical to get that done during the first days of transition, and then so we can move right on to start configuring this data bridge and the station node for the satellite VBI as its primary. And that will take most of the rest of October to do that. And then in November, we'll be repointing the VSATs to GE3. That'll take most of November to do that. And in conjunction with that time frame, we'll be reconfiguring the VSAT once the dishes have been repointed, hopefully to be completed by around the first part of December. And with all of that, we are looking to establish Dicipher II service to Alaska around the late October, early November time frame. We've basically come up with that time frame to allow us to get over this major initial transition hump before we tackle that task. So if you have any problems or questions regarding this transition in National Datacast, please give us a call at 739-5400 and ask the operator that you tell the operator that you have some transition questions and want to speak to someone in network operations. We'll be glad to hear from you and talk to you and give you any information you need. Or, as you've done in the past, you can email or call any of our network operations staff that's working on the transition, which includes me, John Kolstad, or Anthony Johnson. Also, check the Data Services Plus for updates, information regarding this transition. And once again, as always, thanks for your assistance in making this a successful transition. And with that, I'll turn it back to Andy.
Thanks, Dave. Just a couple of more things to wrap up on transition, and then we'll have a surprise for you. One of the questions that I've been asked several times about the transition is, what about the PBS remote control program? As I mentioned before, you do need to make some changes. The first thing you need to do is obtain the updated software that is posted today in Compression Plus. Then install the updated software using the same procedures as you used for installing version 2, the current version, and those procedures are included in the message that is posted in Compression Plus. Now, once the change is in operation, there's one thing that you have to be aware of. There's one thing that has been changed, is once you're into the Dicipher II channel map, you cannot switch to a channel that's outside the map. And that's something that can really trip you up when you're using the remote control software. So do be careful if you go out and try to manually tune to a service that's not in the channel map. If you have questions about using PBS's remote control service and how receiver tuning, please get a hold of David Wang. You can call him at 703-739-5067, the number on your screen, or you can post your questions to Compression Plus on LIS First Class. Now, what about LIS? Well, now you're on to one of my favorite topics. Something I wanted to tell you is that LIS does control both types of IRDs, both the 1500s and the 4400s simultaneously, and to allow you the most flexibility in making the transition. The LIS schedule will have both schedule nomenclatures included during the transition period. Now, I am going to tell you, I'm going to do this for the shortest time possible, and I'll be working with the individual LIS stations to get them transitioned because I have to do that duplicate schedule manually, and I'm a little bit lazy. Speaking of LIS, as I told you in our last teleconference, we have a new LIS equipment supplier, and this is something I'm very pleased with. It gives us the opportunity to bring you an LIS system and some other options that is a really great system. The new vendor is MicroFirst Incorporated, and joining us from MicroFirst Incorporated at WGBH in Boston, we have the president of the company, John Scarpa, the programming guru of the LIS and DAS, John Bennett, and also a fellow who has been very, very influential in taking LIS to the next step, which is the DAS, George Toplansky. Now, we're going to join those fellows in just a minute. I just wanted to give you a quick rundown. People keep saying, okay, why MicroFirst? Well, we've chosen MicroFirst because they're a very experienced supplier. They've been in this business a long time. They've done a lot of work. They did the CBS NetQ system, the NPR satellite control system. They supply gaming management systems to casinos all over the country, and they haven't had their legs broken yet, so we know they work. They have a range of options available for the stations. They can give you a local insertion system, which fits within the traditional PBS architecture. They also have an expanded option that they've developed in conjunction with WGBH, the digital audio automation system, so you have Liz or Daz. And they also have the resources in terms of programming skill and people to continue to do the job. In fact, they're working right now on updating the system to the Windows NT platform, and I'll let the fellows in Boston talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, just a couple of more items I want to talk about before we let the guys in Boston have their turn. People have said, well, what's different between LIS and DAS? The traditional LIS is a fully integrated single solution. It includes everything you need for your operation: a router, a program switcher, a character generator, a video server, a control computer, and a sync generator. It's a standalone miniature television station in a rack, and it's optimized for single channel installations. You want to run one program channel, this is the box that's optimized for that. What about DAS? This is like the opposite end of the spectrum from LIS. It is a completely flexible architecture. It's easily expanded. It can utilize existing station resources, and it's optimized for multiple channel installations. Now, that's the difference between the two systems, and the guy that knows more about these systems than anybody else is standing by up at WGBH in Boston. I hope they can join us now. They've been waiting patiently for their chance to talk to you this afternoon, and I'd like to introduce John Scarpa, who is the president of MicroFirst. John?
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having us on today. I think you went right from the general, which I was going to cover, to the technical. And our technical guru, as you mentioned, is John Bennett.
Hello, Andy. How are you?
Today, thank you thank you for being here, and I'm really glad that you're able to rejoin this project. It's kind of like bringing the father back to the child. One of the things that people have asked me, and I know I may be crossing you up a little bit here, but if you had to characterize the approach that you took in coming up with the structure for the DAS, the Digital Automation System, could you just give us kind of an overall view of what your philosophy was and how that differed from the approach to the LIS?
Yes. The DAS, or the Digital Automation System, was approached from the inside out. We looked at functionality in terms of station needs, and we built software modules to accomplish that. From that point, we looked on the outside of the system, looking in, and wrote interface modules to communicate with various devices, VTRs, station routers, servers, and the like. So what we have now is a system that internally, functionally, stays the same and can grow, and externally we can just put in different software modules to communicate to just about whatever hardware is available now and in the future.
So that's a very good expansion of the system. I'm going to ask John now. One of the other questions that people are asking me is, okay, you've been messing around with this LIS system, seems like for years. If someone is interested in either utilizing LIS or DAS in their operation, how soon can you actually supply them with the system?
Well, our standard time frame for quoting a system is 8 to 12 weeks, and I think that's realistic. When you get to the DAS system, it may be there may be some particulars involved if we have to write a new driver for a new piece of equipment. But in the case of, say, WHRO in Virginia, which has purchased the DAS system, from the time they ordered the system to the time they became fully functional and up and running, which happened to be yesterday, was probably 3 weeks. And that is that they purchased a small amount of hardware from us, excepting the server itself. We sold them a Sony video server and the software, and they connected that hardware in with their existing control center hardware, for instance, their Utah Scientific router and their VTRs. So a standard delivery time of 8 to 12 weeks, or in some cases better, is how fast we can turn systems around.
So what you're saying is that literally in 3 weeks you were able to bring a system online. Now that uses, and I want to make sure that I understand this. You were actually able to use their existing router and their existing VCRs and add a server to achieve a multi-channel automation system. Is that what you were able to do?
Yes.
That is correct. And I don't want to mislead you in saying that when I say they're up and running, they are up and running in test mode now. They plan to begin to deliver live programming tomorrow, October 1st.
So it's 3.5 weeks instead of 3 weeks. Well, that's fool on you for exaggerating. One of the things that is also important to the stations is obviously pricing. We've had a proposed price point out for the LIS for quite some time. A lot of stations have made budget plans based on that. Are you going to be able to operate around that price point for the LIS? And then following on to that, what is your pricing philosophy in general for the DAS?
Well, we have held to the existing pricing for the LIS system, the existing pricing being what's been in force for maybe a year now. And that pricing is published and available on the LIS Plus. What we've tried to do with the DAS system is break it up into 4 levels: an introductory level, and some intermediate levels, and then the complete and full-blown system. The introductory level system is priced commensurate with the LIS system, and that is accepting a server. as we move on, in writing new drivers for servers, the options for servers may be from the lowest end being around $20,000 approximately, right on up to a full-blown $150,000 server system. But the price range for the DAS starts at $28,000, and the high end is $50,000, and that is for the software. The hardware that you need is all depending on what you already have in your operation.
So you're talking basically about a fully functional software system for automation control for $25,000 to $50,000, and then the other auxiliary equipment is necessary. One final question, and this one I'm going to put John Bennett on the spot just a little bit. John, I mentioned that we're looking at porting to an NT platform. Is there any guesstimate about when that might be completed?
Yes, we are feverishly working on that, and we want to be fully ported over by next NAB, but we're shooting more towards the February timeframe, mid to end of February.
Good. I'm going to, I could talk all day about LIS and DAS, and the guys up in Boston obviously could also. One thing that I would note is that George Stepansky is not on camera up in Boston. I want to give George a very large thank you for the part that he's played, both in the development of the LIS, the development of the DAS, and also making this appearance possible today. If you have questions about the DAS system, George is a good person to talk to, and we're going to have lots more opportunities to hear about LIS and DAS in the coming week. We have a special video conference coming. We're going to be featuring the system in a full display with the fellows from MicroFirst at the fall planning meeting coming up in a few weeks here in Washington. And then, of course, always we have the engineering planning meeting coming up later this fall, so there's going to be lots of opportunity to get more information. Also, if you want information, you can check at WGBH in Boston. They'll be more than happy to have you in for a tour. We also have further information available on LIS Plus on First Class, or you can contact John Scarpa directly. His phone number and email address are on the screen. I'm going to ask the guys in Boston if they could to stick around for the Q&A in case people want to learn more. But for now, Ralph, that's what we have to talk about. And right now, I will tell you, if you have questions on Digicipher II issues, either the satellite transition or the Dicipher II issues, please get in touch with me. My phone number is on the screen, 703-739-5474, or post it to Compression Plus or LIS Plus on First Class. And I think they've heard more than they probably wanted to hear from me this afternoon, Ralph, so I'm going to toss it back to you for our questions and answers.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks very much. And we're running just a couple minutes later than we thought we would be, but I hope we've given you a lot of useful information today, both by way of recap for those of you who might have missed the first video conference, and certainly the new information more specifically related to the DSR 4000. I want to invite you to call in now. Number will be on the screen in a minute, if I remember it correctly. Oh, thanks. 703-739-5368 is our number. That's not the usual number. Got a couple lines that aren't working today, but in any case, that's the number to call. Please give us a call, and we're here to answer the questions. Andy and I and Dave Burrows and the gentleman in Boston are here. Andy, I wanted to just take a minute to remind people that although we went through a lot of very specific instructions on tuning of the IRD and the installation of the IRD, that we did post, I think, about a 4-page tuning instruction, presumably in Engineering Plus. There's so many conferences there. Remember that both Satellite Plus and Compression Plus show up within the Engineering Plus folder. So they may not immediately be visible on your desktop. You're going from Technology Plus into Engineering Plus and down a level from that. But all of the information you're going to need to make this transition, starting this Sunday at 12:01 a.m., is there. We will incidentally have full staff on board here at PBS on Sunday to help you through issues then. But I think, as we said in the last video conference, and I want to reaffirm in this one, our primary concern for about the first 3 days of the transition is to get you moved from Telstar 4 to GE3, or in the case of the Alaska and Caribbean stations, from Telstar 4 to GE1, which is a more complex move because it has to go to Dicipher II. But we would ask your cooperation in that first 3 days, 4 days to a week, that if you've successfully found GE3, that's the important thing, that you may not have resolved every Dicipher II issue in that first week, but we are going to be focusing on the satellite antenna move. Give us a few days, give the stations who need help in the antenna move a few days before you start peppering us with the Dicipher II related questions. It would.
Something I wanted to remind them, you said tuning instructions, something that would be fooled. The message that actually appears on first class is not labeled tuning instructions, it's labeled installation suggestions and tips for the DSR 4000. It covers the spacing issues and the RF cabling issues and all of that. So don't go looking for tuning instructions. I know that's the most important part, but it's actually installation suggestions is what you're looking for. And Ralph, I think you have a phone call.
I'm going to just mention one other thing, and then I am going to go to the first call. I know in your demonstration, Andy, that we were talking specifically about the L-band frequency and all of the manual tuning instructions to locate us on the KU band feed. That's presumably a different frequency and a different set of instructions that we would be using for the C-band feed. We'll make sure that the non-CONUS stations get that information, although the virtual channel table number 15 is valid on both, but obviously the frequency and the satellite is different. Let's take the first call we got, and this may have been the first call we got on last week's video conference as well. Can't remember, but I think we talked to you. Lou Labate out in KVIE in Sacramento, California. Lou?
Yeah, hi there, Ralph.
Hello.
The GE3 beacon frequency of 12198, what is the L-band frequency for that?
I know Andy can do the math because I think we're going to subtract 10750 from it if memory serves, but I can't do that in my head, Lou. 12198 minus 10750.
If I could do that.
Anybody else doing the quick math?
Right, I'm doing the quick math. That would be 1448.
1448, Lou.
And I encourage you to get out your calculator and do that yourself to make sure I didn't screw it up. That's yes, it's 12198 minus 10750.
Got it.
So, thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Before I take the next call, and I do have one lined up incidentally, I do want to point out that as we had last time, we do have a few wonderful prizes. There was no prize associated with caller number 1. Sorry, Lou, but as people will attest, I had these numbers written down before. And caller number 2, which happens to be Spence Layton from KNME in Albuquerque. Caller number 2, you were going to win this fine Next Level Systems Universal Remote Control. So congratulations on calling in, and we do have a few other fine prizes here for callers later on. But Spence Layton, KNME, go ahead.
Yes, how you doing, Ralph?
I'm just fine, thanks.
We're one of the test stations, and I have a couple of points of interest to the stations that haven't hooked up their 4000s yet.
Go ahead.
One thing, make sure your signal level is adequate.
Yes.
We had some problems with low level or marginal level with our IRDs locking up, and we had flashes and such like this. And that we did have to manually tune all our IRDs ahead of time. And then when it found this mapping, it worked fine.
Yeah,
we did leave it overnight, and it did not lock in.
Yeah, that's something that you do need to be very careful about. The IRD, the 4000, is going through and checking all sorts of different combinations, looking for the right combination of forward error correction rate and symbol rate and frequency. And to be very honest about it, it can slip up. And so particularly if you have a marginal signal level to begin with, it will definitely never find the home channel and download the maps. So it's just a much better idea to go ahead and do the manual tuning to point it to the channel map. It's kind of like, yeah, you can climb Mount Everest in a Volkswagen, but it's a lot easier to do it a better way. So do the manual tuning routine. It's well worth that couple of minutes of button pushing. And once you've done it once, one of the problems I have is that I've done it so many times, when I start to slow down to explain it to somebody, I start tripping over myself. And so once you've done it a couple of times, it's kind of like second nature.
Yeah, that manual tuning process is indeed what we were showing to you. The IRD has enough of a brain that it'll go out and find that feed if it has to, but it would far prefer it, and it'll make it a lot faster for you if you simply load the L-band frequency and the polarization and the data rate and the FEC, the combination that Andy discussed, and then it'll get there in 60 to 90 seconds. And just a reminder that the other thing that's happening when it's doing that, that's the only frequency that you'll ever have to load in the IRD. All of the other channel information will be transmitted to your IRD on that home channel. The home channel we have you tuning to is simply that big MCPC that we're putting up there. But the map that you will be downloading, the virtual channel table number 15 that you will be downloading, includes the frequency, the polarization, all the information you need to tune to the SCPC feeds and the analog feeds that are included within that map. Spence, you're still there?
Yes, I have a couple more questions. I would highly recommend them manually tuning. First of all, what about the warranty period for the new 4000s?
I can do that one because I just finished that discussion up yesterday. The warranty period on the 4000s is 14.5 months from the date that they ship the IRD, which is effectively giving you the 1 year plus a little bit of extra bonus on it. The IRDs will start going off warranty in early December of 1998. I could give you the specific dates on your IRDs. It'll be different on the first 4 you got than it is on the second 4. But within a week or two of each other, we're talking about a December 1st to mid-December 1998 that you'll be on warranty. And I will post more information on that, including options to extend the warranty coverage, etc., in first class soon. I haven't started worrying about 1998 yet.
Okay, another question. This will be my last one. We have our 8 4000s tuned to SBS5 now. When we move to GE3, will we have to turn them off? I remember the last teleconference, someone had problems with the IRDs getting faulted or such.
I can take that one. It will be much easier for you to take your IRDs back to the factory reset position, and that, in case I'm sure you know where it is, Spence, but for those who don't, it was what I did to get us started today, and it'll just save a lot of time, because once again that blows out any of the channel maps that may be present in the IRD from SBS5, and they are different when we go to GE3, and so rather than take a chance of getting a convoluted channel map or one of those type of things, you're probably better off just to take it down to the factory reset and begin again.
Okay. Thank you for the remote control, too. I didn't call you in for that, but that's fine. That's a bonus, right?
That's a bonus.
Yeah, there you
didn't
go.
even know we were offering it.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for calling.
We have another call coming in just a second, but while we're identifying it, let me just tell you, I do have some other fine prizes here, including a next level ballpoint pen. This is really kind of a unique pen. For those of you who have been involved in the chat conference discussion of pocket protectors, this one is really a fine writing instrument with a simulated leather, or maybe it's even real. And I mean, this is really a high-tech looking pen. So this is going to go to some lucky caller in the future. And for engineers who were at the NAB convention, you will recognize this fine compressed digital T-shirt. Oh boy.
It's full size.
It glows in the dark. This fine digital T-shirt, very compressed. Anyway, this will be going to a future caller as well. So we have one call coming in. Let me mention one other item that I know David Yuang would have a fit if I didn't say it. Because of the delays that we're experiencing in identifying exactly how we're handling the auxiliary services, I have a feeling that the remote control posting that he was going to put in today for the Dicipher II DSR 4000 IRDs is probably not there. It will be there tomorrow. I'm relatively certain if Andy and I and company get back together and identify how we're handling the auxiliary services, because that has to be done before he can give you an accurate map. And with a little bit of luck, I'm guessing that Andy knows who our next mystery caller is.
Yes, yes. Our next caller is Tim Stoffel from WXXI. Kim, I'm sorry.
Tim.
Okay. And so, Kim, are you with us? Well, perhaps not. So.
All right, well, we're going to vamp for just a second here. Tim Stoffel, we've apparently lost you. If you want to call back in, we'll try to pick you up. And frankly, with all these fine prizes here and all the calls we got last week, maybe we did so well that we've answered all your questions, but we are here for the next 30 minutes or so. So we encourage you to give us a buzz. And we can go to a wide shot for a minute.
Right, so you can get that information.
While we sit here and vamp. Andy, anything else you want to cover that you think either we might have missed or while we're waiting for the next call?
Well, there are a couple of things that I did want to mention to people. This may sound trivial, but it is something that you need to be aware of. We've torture tested these DSR 4400s by interrupting their power, pulling the RF, pulling the power, pulling the RF. They retain the channel maps very well. They recover gracefully and come back online. There are two instances, and only one of them that's important to you. If you should happen to suffer a power interruption during the time when you're first trying to tune the IRD and going into the channel map acquisition, it will go stupid. And that's a real technical term, but what it does is it gets confused. It said, I didn't complete my search, what's going on? So if that should happen to you, and it's going to happen to at least one guy, you know it is, simply go back to the installation menu and do the factory reset and begin again. You just need to flush it out, clear all of its memory, and then you can start again. That way you don't have to get out there in the la-la land somewhere and wonder exactly what's going on.
That does remind me to tell you that probably that information is included, hopefully, somewhere in the DSR 4000 manual that came along with the box, with the IRD in the box. And although, just as we had to warn you in advance, because we thought you just might do it, not to just plug it in and see if it burned up a transistor or two, maybe you've read the manual by this time, but if not, the manual is definitely there. There are a few good things in it. We actually had a look at that manual before it was printed, tried to make it a little more useful to you. Hope it helps. But it is there. Obviously, what we sent you in the 4 or 5 pages of installation instructions is not the complete story. And we've got another call at this point, we hope, from Frank Walensky at WEDU in Tampa, Florida. Frank, sorry you're not one of the big winners, but glad to have you call in.
I'm sorry to hear that, but that's not why I call, Ralph.
Okay.
Great job, gentlemen. Specifically, we plan on hooking up the IRDs, 6 of them to the KU GE3 feed and 2 to the GE1 feed that will be provided for Alaska and the Caribbean. Specifically, we were looking at our rain fade condition down here, and we're curious if we're going to have any problems. We need to look at switching back and forth with any of the other IRDs between the C-band and the KU feeds.
I will take a crack at that one, but Andy may care to join in. It is a common channel map that we are feeding you from a common uplink control system that is doing both the non-CONUS and the CONUS MCPCs. That's a long way of saying that it's 2 different encoders but going through the same uplink system. So the authorization stream that we're feeding is common to both of the MCPC feeds on both birds. The virtual channel table is common to both. You should have no problem using the same IRD to get to either, depending on which antenna you have it hooked up to.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much.
And Andy, I hope I did that.
Absolutely correct, Ralph. The one thing that people, people are always dreaming and scheming. A couple of people have read the manual, which tells you can do this, and have said, okay, I want to connect my port 0 to one bird and my port 1 to the other bird. Well, we haven't been able to test this until we get the signals up there on both birds and we can experiment with it and see what kind of possible difficulties that may cause. I would discourage you from doing that at first. We are going to try it. If it works, then we'll pass along the information to you about how to do that, and you can kind of make your own decision about whether ignoring some of the regional feeds on the opposite polarity and those kind of issues are worth the sacrifice to be able to have one IRD that looks at both feeds. But I'll have to tell you right now, we haven't tested it. We're not sure it works or not, and so I would discourage that at least at first. Ralph?
And Andy's tossed it back to me, but I'm sitting here having heard nothing in my ear about another caller.
Okay.
So we're going to wait for just a couple minutes. Dave Burrows, you want to chime in here with anything extra on the datacast transition?
Well, since we do have a few minutes, I can divulge a few of our, I guess, what we're thinking in terms of the Digicipher II conversion. Like I mentioned, we're looking at converting to Dicipher II from the analog feed in the first quarter of '98, and to do that, we're going to be using 256 kilobit speed on the high-speed data channel coming in on the IRD. And of course, we're working with PBS engineering to do some testing now on that. We're designing a digital interface board, which will basically be a demultiplexer, which will go on each line card in our data bridge. So at the point we're ready to convert, we'll be basically pulling out the line card, taking off the VBI decoder card, and the same footprint basically putting back the digital interface board. We're testing the prototype for that digital interface board right now, and probably in the next few weeks we'll sign off on that and then send it to manufacturer. And so we're expecting to deliver around that first quarter. So after everything else has died down, then we'll get busy on going to the Dicipher II feed ourselves. So there's a quick update for you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And we
Could
do have.
you use a different word than died down? That's a little bit worrisome.
Sure.
Okay.
We do have another caller, one whose name I recognize because he was kind enough to send me his second round DSR 4000 serial numbers today, and that's Fred Hosack in Springfield, Missouri at KOZK. Fred, you there?
How you doing, Ralph?
Hi.
Yeah, thank you for the 12 receivers. We'll be sending the other 4 back
Fred,
tomorrow.
you were not supposed to divulge that,
bonus.
Fred. Yes, if any of you get
And
more
your prize.
if any of you get more IRDs than you were expecting, we'd appreciate it if you'd be as honest as Fred and let us know so that we can take care of that.
You do realize they mentioned another 8 coming, but Next Level said that was a mistake, so we won't have 20 altogether. I do have a question regarding the remote control, as in with the lockup. Will the new remote control version correct problems with the lockup using Windows 95?
Yes, that's the short answer. David Yuang has made a number of improvements to the program in addition to adding the ability to handle Digicipher II. So the lockup problem, based on our testing so far, is behind us, and the software works very well. So I would encourage people who have been using the remote control software to upgrade and continue to use that software. If you tried the remote control software in one of its early editions and had some problems or were a little bit discouraged perhaps about some of the things it did, I think it's time you gave it another try, because he's handled a lot of those problems. I'll never say that a piece of software is completely bug-free, but I think David has done a very good job now of trying to stamp out the big ones and a lot of the small ones as well. So if you haven't tried it lately, I think you might like it quite a bit.
Okay, we do have some results we'll forward on to David as well, that we can work together on this end as well. Appreciate your calling.
Right, and we appreciate your calling, and please do give us the feedback on your experiences with either the IRDs, the remote control programs, the LIS system, any of the things that you're attempting to implement. We would very much like to have your feedback, because once again, it doesn't do us any good to create things if it's not the right thing for the member stations and what you're trying to do with your mission. So please let us have the feedback. I'm a sensitive guy. Sometimes I'll take offense. No, I don't. You can tell me just about anything and I won't. And I need to hear that back from you. So if you think it's dumb, if you think it's stupid, please let us know. If there's something we're not doing that you'd like for us to do, let me know that. I'm if we do something right, wouldn't hurt to tell me that too. At least, that way I can go down and pat Rudy on the back and say, hey, you got another guy who likes you. So do let us know what you think.
Okay, we do have another caller on the line. This is caller number 5, Ken Segota from KUID in Moscow, Idaho. And Ken, you're the winner of this fine Next Level pen, which will be on its way to you. Hope you're still there. Oh my.
Well, it's that Ken.
Oh my.
I told you,
We
don't
seem to have a problem line here.
Yes.
This didn't happen to us in the first conference when we had more calls than we knew what to do with.
We were exercising the lines.
Ken and Tim Stoffel up there in Rochester, if you'd try to call us back, we'd appreciate it. We seem to have lost you. Ken, if you do get back to us, the pen is still yours, but well, who knows? Anyway, the one thing I did want to remind, as Andy was talking about, letting us know if your experience with Dicipher II with remote control, etc. Again, I want to doubly emphasize the schedule that says that although we're going to start the feeds on GE3 and all of those Dicipher II services on GE3 starting on Sunday, October 5th at 12:01 a.m., our emphasis is really on getting those antennas moved over, not on Dicipher II issues. And I guess it is worth emphasizing just one more time what that actual transition schedule is, which says from Sunday, October 5th at 12:01, or look at that as the beginning of the broadcast day. I think we have an 8 a.m. feed of Sesame Street on Sunday morning. From that feed until the end of the day on Saturday, October 11th, that's the time you have to move that satellite antenna. But we really want you to do it early in the week, and we really want you to call in or write in on Satellite Plus to tell us that you've accomplished that antenna move. Or maybe you're not moving. Maybe you're putting a temporary antenna on GE3, establishing service and then moving the vertex. What we're really interested in is when you've got the vertex moved over, when you've got your large antenna moved. And we hope you'll do that early, because obviously you're going to have stronger signal in the big vertex antenna than you did in the smaller antenna. We ran into a lot of small antenna issues when we had to quickly move, that was an understatement, from Telstar, the dear departed Telstar 401 to the Telstar 402. We know a lot of you used small antennas to cover that transition. You may do that again, but what we're really interested in is when you get the big antenna moved over, and we're hoping you'll be doing that in the first several days. And at this point, we're also hoping that we've got another telephone call.
Yes, and we have another Tim this time. Different Tim. This one is Tim Cook at WOUB. Tim, welcome.
Hello, I'm just, we had a lot of power supply failures here on the 1500s.
Amen.
On the 4000 design, did you ever increase that power supply or beef it up a little bit so we wouldn't have so many failures?
Yeah, the power supply on the DSR 4400 is a completely different design. 4000, I'm sorry. On the DSR 4000 is a completely different design than the power supply on the original power supply on the DSR 1500. Thank goodness. And, hopefully, I can't guarantee, because we've only had them in service for about 3 months here, but evaluating the design and looking at the way that the unit is built, I don't see any obvious flaws on the order of the undersized capacitors in the 1500. Now, one thing I will tell you, and I want to emphasize and re-emphasize and re-emphasize this, my caution about spacing them apart for cooling is very real. It's based on observations that we made during our performance testing here at the SOC, and as I said, it isn't so much the ambient temperature of the unit that's important. It's being able to get enough convection airflow into some critical components in the IRD. So give these some space, give them some breathing room, and they should be a much more reliable performer than the 1500.
Yeah, on the 1500, we have about 2 rack spaces between each one, and yet we still had a lot of failures.
Right. Well,
so there had to be a weakness.
Right. There was definitely a design weakness. The 1500, the original power supply, the capacitors, the snubbing capacitor in that switching power supply was about half the value that it should have been. And it was It had nothing to do with temperature, even though obviously if you had a high temperature situation, it aged an already over stressed capacitor far too quickly. But the basic capacitor was not the correct sizing. That was a fault of a lot of the early switching power supply designs, and because of that, there were a lot of conditions. If you had a lot of line transients, if you had a lot of high voltage spikes, if you had concentrated heat, there were lots of things that could mask the real problem, but the real problem was simply bad design.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Tim. And Tim, since you were the actual caller number 5 to get through, and since I have 2 of them, and I might never hear from Ken Segota again, we will send one of these fine pens your way as well. Thanks for calling in. And Tim's another one that has already given me his DSR 4000 serial numbers from round 2, so we appreciate that. And at this point, once again, I don't think we have any calls on the line. We're here for the next 15 minutes, or we could be, but since I didn't bring any home movies and neither Andy or I dance very well, actually I shouldn't say that. I don't dance very well, and I don't know about you, Dave.
I try.
Dave tries.
We spend our life tap dancing.
We'll be here for a few more minutes, but we're not going to bore you with our faces for much longer than we have to. So give us a call in the next few minutes, or we'll think we answered all the questions, and we'll close it down.
I am going to answer one question that people have asked several times, and this is, I skipped this in the installation section because it was emphasized once before, but I got an email just the other day that indicated that not everyone heard what I said. As far as the video, audio, and RF connections for the DSR 4000, they are exactly the same as the DSR 1500. So you should be able to, if you are very limited on rack space or you don't want to pre-wire, you should be able to take out a 1500 and put a 4000 in its place and not have to do any dramatic amount of rewiring. So that answer to the fellow who apparently missed it the first time around, and anyone else who did. Ralph, I think you got a
we're
call.
going to take another crack at Tim Stoffel from WXXI TV in Rochester, New York. Tim, you with us this time? Oh, this has not been our day.
Oh, well, I did get a chance to chat with Tim the other day, and I know his phone works. I wish.
And we know that. We can't tell now. Having had great success in the first video conference, it's always hard to know whether this is us or whether it's station. We apologize for that. It's probably us. We'll take the blame. Tim, if you want to try one more time, you're welcome to do so. And Ken Segota out in Moscow, since we missed you as well. Boy, I wish I had some more stuff, some more vamp lines here to fill. Bill Hull's sitting off on the side of the room here, but I think Bill is he's out of the light. And so, got anything you want to holler into us, Bill?
Hey.
I think you've done a great job.
Oh, that camera tried to.
Yeah, he says you did a great job.
Did a great job. Okay.
Bill's guys out at the SOC.
Tim Stoffel, we're going to try you one more time, maybe.
Tim, are you with us?
Hello. Am I with
Congratulations, you
Tim,
made
you
it.
have made it through for your perseverance. For your perseverance.
Well, guess what? This is the 13th time I've called to try to get in here.
Ooh.
I'll be sending you some notes on renting our truck next time you want to do this.
No, this has nothing to do with the truck. This is our phone bridge. It's a weak link in the system. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
our
Tim.
bridge on the truck works. But anyway, got a couple of questions for you. The first one is, what exactly does the FEC numbers mean? I know FEC means forward error correction, but what does 3/4 mean, for instance?
Well, that's 3/4 forward error correction, and that is the amount of bit overhead that is devoted in the data stream to actually verifying the bits that are present in the data stream. And there's a whole series of symbol rates and forward error correction rates that work in pairs. We're using a very healthy symbol rate of 29 plus, and the forward error correction rate then of 3/4 gives us the ability to restore down to a very low signal level or signal to noise level, EB over N0. And so the forward error correction rate is actually a reflection of the percentage of the raw bit that is applied to correcting errors in the transmitted signal.
And just so you understand it, the percentage is the 3/4 means 3/4 of the bits are going into video and 1/4 is going into forward error correction, not the other way around.
That's correct.
Okay, that answers that question. The next question is something that I kind of caught here along the way on the PBS remote control software, and you know that one of my colleagues here, Ed Wright, has done a lot of work on that. Yes. Is that going to require us to install Windows 95 on that computer?
It will run under either 3.1 or Windows 95 in the current version. To be quite honest about it, it does perform a little better under Windows 95. I know Ed and I had a chat about this up at Syracuse at the SBE meeting the other day. So once again, it will run under Windows 3.1. It performs very well. It runs a little bit slower than it does under Windows 95. But if you don't want to put Windows 95 on the remote control computer, and I know a lot of people have problems and concerns about that, it will run and run correctly under 3.1.
Okay, so we don't have to do that, drop what we're doing immediately.
No, you don't have to drop immediately. As I said, it does perform a little better under Windows 95. So at some point when you run out of everything else to do, you've sorted your socks and done your wash for the week and all of that, and you feel like really taking some pain, you can start trying to install Windows 95. Can you guess I use OS2?
I run Linux, so
yes, you're used to an operating system that really keeps track of what it's doing. So
yeah, it really does work well too.
It sure does.
Anyway, the last question I have for you is, and this might be just a little off the beaten track, but on the NDI system, is the transmit capability of the VSAT used at all?
Not at this time. It's only a back channel for network status, basically, of the DIU. We do have plans to integrate that into our network management system sometime next year, where we basically, rather than have the data bridge dial out to our network management center, we will basically send the traffic over the inbound route of the VSAT.
Okay, that answers the questions I had. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Tim, and thanks to Ed out there, who has been the early champion of the remote control program and has worked, I know, with David and with the rest of us here at PBS to get that system up and functional. We appreciate that. We know there are a lot of stations who are not using it, but for those stations that do need it, the fact that it is working for you is due in no small part to a lot of cooperative effort with Ed Wright at WXXI, with PBS staff here. And at this point, once again, I don't have any calls waiting, and we've still got about 10 minutes. If you want to call us and give us a shout, see if we can answer any questions, although I'm probably going to let it die in about 2 minutes if I don't have another call by then. Oh, okay, we're going to take one. Larry Anderson, who, if memory serves, is KAKM in Anchorage, Alaska. I hope I got that right, Larry. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Larry.
Oh, yes, you do have it right. I do have one question about the remote control. Since I have a specialized card and it's talked to the RRDs, I may need an extra one, since when we turn over to our Andrew over GE1, I'll need control of the RRDs there. And right now, the old HP computer is running a remote control program for our two 1500s out in the commercial station where we get our programming. I was wondering if those cards are still available.
Yes, the cards are still available if you need to install a second card. That gets into some fairly complicated configuration issues. I'm talking
about in a different computer entirely.
Yeah, yes, that's what I was about to say. My suggestion would be to use a second computer for controlling for hosting the second card and for controlling the second location. It is possible to do a dual configuration out of a single computer, but it gets into some really complicated both operator interface and setup problems. So I would say go for a second computer, and the card is still available. If you need sourcing information, you can contact David Yuang here at PBS, or you can get a hold of Rudy Pruitt in the PBS Engineering Lab, and we'll take care of you.
You've got a really unique installation situation there that we're going to have to deal with, Larry, and I think we'll call you offline. That you've got a very unique situation that the other stations should not think that they even come close to dealing with the transition issues you are. We appreciate that difference.
All right.
And Larry, incidentally, I'm sorry, you were the next caller, and this fine compressed T-shirt is on its way to Anchorage.
Oh boy.
A T-shirt for Anchorage. Now there's a fit.
This is not exactly calls to Newcastle, but I mean there must be 1 month during the year when you needed this T-shirt.
It's already occurred.
Well, it'll be about 6 months from now.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right, you're welcome.
Thanks, Larry.
Okay, I think, frankly, that given no other calls, unless there's anything you want to offer by way of closing remarks, like I will offer them. If another call comes in, we'll take it. But I think since the loss of Telstar 4, we've put you through an awful lot. We've been through an awful lot. And I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. This is a major day coming up on Sunday. And a major week as we go through the transition to what I think is our 7th satellite, and at least our 6th transition, therefore. This one we hope has been well planned. We trust it will be well executed, and that you will find us in a hurry on the new GE3 satellite. We're going to be happy to be there. I'm sure you're going to be happy to have us there. Andy, any calls coming in your eardrum?
Nope.
Nothing. Okay, well then we're going to wrap this conference up at this point, and thank you all for watching, the engineers and any traffic people that have stuck with us through all this, and programmers. Good luck with the transition. Do send us notification that you've found the new satellite, and again when you've got the DSR 4000s working. Appreciate all the effort this is going to take at your stations. It'll all be worth it, believe me. And we will see you the other side of GE3. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.